So it is time to get, well, XElementy, right? And see from this main body of text that we've got here, right, what elements are able to be replicated, what can we take out and change, right? What needs what, basically, right? So we've got buttons and they've been replicated more than once. They have all changing locations, happy days, right? But what I'm wanting to do is actually, do you know what I'm going to do? Is I'm going to assign each button their HTML event list, their data attributes, right? Just so that way we know which button does what and when, right? Because it does say change to Toronto, etc. But let's just get these attributes and put them on as, well, here. So we're going data location equals this. And popping these all on here. Dot home PE, sorry. There we go. Dot home Reykjavik. Copy and paste. Honestly, it should have been like a 90s cartoon detective show. You know, copy and paste. We've had Turner and Hooch and everything else, so why not? And then I'm just going to keep doing this for most of these buttons here.
So instead of a set state instruction, what you're doing is just attaching a data location property to each of these buttons?
That's correct. So basically, the DOM gives us a lot of ability to save and serialize data on each element on the page, right? If the page is not being refreshed, that is, right? By setting the location on each button, right? Yeah, we're effectively delegating its state implicitly on each button, right? This is something that when you're in React land, you don't really get. You don't really directly utilize more a lot of, but it's we've got data attributes there for a reason, so when it comes to XElement is all about giving you as close to HTML JavaScript as possible. That relationship is as close to vanilla as possible, and we do strive for that. And happy days, right? So we've got the data locations done, right? Now, let's take a look at these functions again, right? Because we're setting location, and then we're just getting the location context and passing that through, right? And these locations are going to be used within the actual get location siting, which is our fetch, right? Once we get the location, then we're going to be updating the DOM at the bottom of it, right? I take it that's the process, yeah?
Yeah.
Fantastic, right. So right at the very top, let's bring in the big guns. And all we're going to do is be importing XElement directly into the project for the first time. Well, and we do so from calling npm and utilizing the Astro XElement and just importing XElement with a capital X and E, because when I saved it, I never have changed it since, because I'm afraid I might break other people's projects if they got it. Yeah, capital X and E, not lowercase, but we'll come to that. Okay, so there's a couple of ways to instantiate XElement. There's XElement is a polymorphic component, right? It is like Play-Doh. Literally, it takes no shape out of the box. XElement has no form to it, right? Until we instruct it to be something. The way that we do that is that we could either go by doing this way here, which is called the naming directives, right? Where we go button and we just call it, say, a giant. So all we're going to do is basically create a button. This on the left hand side is your HTML. So this basically follows the following structure, right? HTML tag followed by my label equals XElement, right? And that's how we name things in XElement. And that is one way of doing it. There is another way of doing it, which is the method that we're going to actually employ for the sake of ease, because it makes changing these standard HTML components very easily into XElement. And we do that just by turning them all into kebab case, right? So what we do, capital B for button, right, basically tells XElement that this is now an actual HTML element button, like what we've got up here. So this bottom line is the equivalent to the top line, right? And that is probably my favorite way of doing it. That is my most preferred way of writing XElement components, is because from then on in, we have the contextual information when we're looking at the Astro page of what we're dealing with. We know if it's a capital HTML tag, it's an XElement one. That is, the real differentiator. And then all we could do is just basically go Control H and replace button with a capital button, right? And just replace all with these. Yeah, it's done it. Right, happy days. So these are all now XElement buttons. So here, these still are HTML elements. Very pretty birdies. Here we go. And yeah, so XElement is HTML first. You tell it the HTML element and it will make it for you. So in the DOM, if we were to inspect the DOM, right, and there's my button. Right? Nothing else in here. Okay? There is no additional script tags apart from the one that was already on the page, right?
No.
Right.
And they have
this is all.
They have the data location attribute on them. The buttons.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
So the data location is here. Data location, data location, data location. So it's like our information that we just need, that one bit of information for each button that we needed, for which Sarah had to spend a fair bit of time, in retrospect, doing this in React, right? Just to do a very similar implementation, right? So we got this. All we're doing is just going back to HTML, right? From React to HTML, nothing fancy, up until we decide to go into one of our buttons and decide to tell it to do a wee bit of JavaScript. Now, with XElement, what you want to do, it will do it for you. Okay? It's a really bad song, but nonetheless, we instruct XElement to conduct client-side JavaScript by basically going, now this doesn't have a date location, this one here, this is just default, isn't it? So and what was the default one again, buddy? Sorry.
CAPEPR.
PR, Prince
Yep.
Edward. Prince. Yep, got you. Right, and this is, I'm just going to put this on a new line, right, because this is pretty much it, right? By having these at handlers, we then tell XElement exactly, we're wanting you to do something here, buddy, right? So what we're going to do, we're just going to basically console log a little hello statement. And as soon as it loaded, it hit do. You seen the console log there? Right? Now, that was on first instantiation, so whenever the element hits and loads onto the screen, it will fire this callback. There is no delay. The moment the DOM has been it's finished executing, and it goes on to that next step of loading the JavaScript, which is the direct step afterwards. That's when it fires, right? But what if we want to just change this to a click, right? So I just don't want this. I want to say hello whenever I click it. Now, XElement does the exact same thing, where all you need to do is just apply the actual event listener, and it would, under the hood, apply the add event listener for you. This is how you provide it here. So, as you can see, when we loaded the page, the console log invocation didn't happen, but when we click, we get our JavaScript. Okay? Now, on the DOM, this is the most important thing. On the DOM, you're expecting to see more scripts and more behaviors, more dirtiness on the DOM, because surely there must be something happening, right? But as you can see, it is pretty much the way we had it, right? Nothing fancy going on there. But at the bottom, still nothing fancy, right? What about the network? Right? That's my highlighter thing. That's Sarah's script. But yeah, that's nothing there. This is actually nothing. Nothing. That's not me. Is it? No. No, no, that's HMR. Yeah, so there's nothing there that's actually from XElement, but we have, in front of your very eyes, JavaScript. So yeah, that is XElement in a very interactive nutshell. HTML first, JavaScript second. Right, now let's start doing some funky stuff, okay? What I want to do is I want to, because we know that this fetch location thingy-majiggy works, right? Now, all we want to do is basically take the data that we've got, right, and manage the state, so that way we update the location into the fetch API, right? So what we're going to be doing now is looking at state and XElement, okay? But before that, I am just going to nip this wee async function out, and I'm going to pop this into a place where we can all share it. And I'm going to stick this into the front matter, right? So, but what we're going to do here is that on every click, I am just going to instantiate a fetch, right, to get the data, right? In here, we've got this fetch request, right, that is basically getting the location, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just, so here we're going to go const fetch birds, right? And XElement, now the next part of this demonstration is to basically explain the parameters that XElement takes. Every callback function that we send into here, right, captures, so this would be the event because it's a click, a store, and certain methods have options that you can control, and here is like you could go once only, so once being true, so this would only fire once and then remove itself from the DOM, etc. Right? So this is how you would provide your fine-grained reactivity and control over the event handler and its propagation, right? This store is what we're going to be using quite a lot, and store is always the second parameter on every callback in XElement. Store is an internal data object for XElement that allows you to basically, it is an empty data object, so you can store anything in there. Numbers, strings, variables, other objects, arrays. You name it, you can put it in there, right? And this also allows you to access that value from other places and add data to it from other places and other X elements as well, right? State, there's a couple of concepts of state with XElement, and these are more intuitive than you would actually think. Saying that the store is there, so it's like a data object that you can store practically anything to. It's available to other X elements as well, so it's transient and it's not stored like physically written to the page or to a local storage. It's not persistent, so if the page was to refresh, the store would refresh, so any changed values would default back to the original ones, right? And then we have the event. So all I'm going to do is just going to event console log our event here, right? And we're just going to go store as well. But what I'm also going to do in here is I'm just going to instantiate the store by doing something. So I'm just going to do, and here I'm just going to show you the parameters of the first of the do as well, right? So this one here is the element. I can't even type now, Sarah. And then from here I'm just going to console log this statement in here just to show you. And right, okay, so we've basically created a namespace on the store, given it an answer, and it's going to be a number, right? And in here, we're going to call this, we're going to console log this, right? And this is only going to fire once. To be honest, I want to keep firing this, right? So I'm going to get rid of the options. Nonetheless, there's documentation to explain them in further detail, right? And then here I'm just going to go store +1, right? Store dot answer, and I'm just going to increase the value of the store, right, just by 1, and then we're just going to console log it, right? Happy days. And I'm just going to put clicked. It's just that now I've turned everything to an X element, it thinks that this is an actual something.
And it's so convenient that we have like 12 buttons.
Oh, totally, totally. I mean, to be honest, right? It's like I'm like a ninja at this stuff, right? And that is it. So we should have life back. But where? But why? What are these class names? I thought I fixed you. Oh, sorry. This demo is not going as
Yeah, we gotta unreact everything now.
Yep. Really unreacting everything. So this is just as close to HTML as you can get, right? This looks good. These are all correct, right? These are all correct. Here we go. We got one here.
Got that, yeah.
Right, and then that's good, and then this is good. Yes, 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 yes. Right, so our initial do, right, back in here, right, was, let me close this, right, all we were asking it to do was to basically log the element, right, which was the actual button, right, so we're just wanting to log the actual DOM element, and we've got the store, and the store should read 42 with an object with an answer space with namespace of 42 in there. And then we click the button, it should just increase the namespace, log the event, and reprint the store, right? That's all we're asking it to do here. We've got it. So we've got the do, we've got the actual DOM element, right? And its children, right? And, that's the actual thing, right? We've got our object, the store, and the answer with the 42. And when we click default location, we get the pointer event, but notice that the answer has now gone up to 43. Click it again, right? Click it again, click it again, click it again, click it again. Answers keep increasing to 40 to 49. Right? So the scores, it's like this is how we keep state across our X elements and our values across our X elements.
And is that kept globally to the page? So if we had other elements, they're all accessing the same store, everything on that one page?
Yes. Yes, they would all be picking up this, so it's like if there was other elements, we'll show that in a wee second, but yes, they would all pick up that value itself. They would all return that value, reflect that value, sorry.
So if we had two buttons and on click they were going to augment the store.answer, then it doesn't matter which button we click, we would still see those numbers go up, 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 pressing either button.
Yep. So I'm just going to get rid of the event because we don't really need the events. Will be a bit noisy in the console log, right? And click from second. Right. Now, Toronto is the second element here, so we click this, we get that, right? Pardon me. Yeah, save. Refresh. Okay, click 43, 44, 45, 46, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Nice.
Simples, no? Right, so now we've got our store working, and we've demonstrated what the store does. We demonstrated the at do, and we've got the at click, right? So let's get a wee bit
I have
funky
a
with
question before you go on.
Of course.
Because we gave that initial value of 42 on the do method of just one of those elements. What would have happened? I'm assuming this would be an error. What kind of error would have happened if that Toronto button also had a do method that tried to write a value to store.answer?
Good question. Let's do it. Because this is the thing, right? It's all about...
Yeah, I'm assuming good practice is not to actually, initialize the value there, but have some other element somewhere on the page that will initialize for you. But I was just curious, well, if one button can set the state...
Of course,
the
why
store,
not two?
rather.
No, you're right.
Then what happens when we pit them against each other?
Fight. And then when we click the good do, it's changed the state to 52. So what initially happened was, in order of execution, the first do came across, set the state to 42.
Yep.
Then the bad do came across, then reset the state to 52. Then when we clicked it, we're now in the 50s. Right, but what I do want to show, right, is you did bring it up, error boundaries, right? Is there any form of error boundaries in XElement? And there is, right? But it's mainly to stop you from doing the dafty things, right? So it's like here we're just passing in a number, right? And this is going to come back saying, oh no, it's broken. It's refreshed. What am I doing? Yeah, so it kicks up a fuss in the terminal, and it will also kick a fuss up in the HMR as well, right? But gitpod, it just dies, right? But it would tell you. So it says, passing the value of 32, which is a number, right? And, it's like, it only really accepts callbacks, so why not pass in a callback? So there is boundaries and error boundaries that are set up for you around, when you're about to do things, and if you do things incorrectly. So for instance, if I pass in a string, right, and ran this is going to break, right? Alright. And see, it broke, right? But it says, oh, you try to pass in a string. And so on every XElement method, there is this error boundary set up where it tries to be a wee bit informative. I don't go into the value of the code, it's like that's the cock up, that could be fixed. but as for us, it's merely to just inform you of how to use the actual method. And then from there, you're happy, you're plain sailing. And yes, you can do async methods as well in there, right? Okay. Now let's get back to just doing this fetch call, right? So ideally, this fetch call needs to stay in within every single button. Every button's going to make the same fetch call kind of thing. The good thing about React was that this, you would normally get this function hoisted into the scope of every element, but every element is encapsulated into itself. Okay. So there's a couple of ways to share this one function, but nonetheless, I just want to share the basic easy one, right? What we're going to do is we're just going to we're going to write the function predominantly within the scope of the front matter, right? Just for our cleanliness, right? And within here, it allows us to then re-implement the same logic in other elements, right? So all I'm doing is just passing in the same callback variables, element and store that it's not element, is event and store, right? That the buttons are going to have, right? And then in here, we're just going to basically got our fetch header, right? We're not setting anything here. We're just going to basically get the notable list birds.
Right now, in the React app, yeah, that is to make sure that the old data is cleared out, obviously before making the fetch call, because otherwise the birds just kept piling up.
Of course. And that was an array, right? So what we're doing, we're just basically just moving that back into a variable, right? And then in here, right, we've got our headers, we've got our request, we've got a response, and this is the location that we're going to be needing, right? So we're going to be needing to get the store.location, right? So another thing that you do have access to within every event, right, is this. Now this refers to the actual element, right? So I could go data set dot location, right, and that will equal location, and then I just go to be honest, I could just actually lift this out of the async and call the async at the top, right? And so lift that out there, get rid of that. Now all this, basically the header is in the function, the request, the fetch request is in here as well, and this just becomes location, right? And we get the data, and all we're going to do is just going to console log the data, right? Just to see if we get it, okay? And in here, right, so following our buttons down, we're just go into our click handler, and then we're just going to go, what was it called again? Fetch birds, right? And we're just going to pass it down like that. We're going to get rid of this, any other noise that we've got kicking about as well, right? So we're going to get rid of the bad do as well. And I'm just going to get back to work now, right? And close that page. Right, so this saved, that's good. This is good, right? It's just popped back these. Did it fetch? It didn't look so. Right, okay. So let's sort the fetch then, right? We just needed to go in here and do cors. No cors. Happy days. We get our response, we get our data, and we are just going to console log data now, please. Do you know what I want to do?
Oh, you know what? It may be fine. Like, it's possible there are no rare birds. So an array of length 0 is not impossible. So let's
That's true.
Yeah, so in our default, I usually put the default as my very, very local region. Scroll down to the default button and let's change it to something that's for sure going to have some data so that we know whether it's.
Right. Okay. That's our Toronto. This is our default
Yeah, I
location
think it's
button.
the top, the
Right.
default button where you've. So whichever button we're working on, let's change it to Toronto because for sure there will be. Yeah, so just make it
Mm-hmm.
CAONTO.
Ontario. Yep.
Yeah,
TO. Right. Okay. I'll
capital
just put
CA though.
this to a
Yeah,
CA.
yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Right.
So at
And
least now
save
we'll know.
that.
If there's no data here, then that's us.
Oh, we've got something.
Look at that.
We've got happy. We've got a response. We've got life. Right. Yeah. So we've got life, right? Okay. So let me, because all I really did there, right, was I just stuck the console log as an await fetch request. So if I just went back and took this out and just went data now, we should have our wee birdies. Refresh and click default location. And we get our birdies.
Oh, that's a whack of birds. Yep.
That's a whack of birds. There you go. Right. And
Excellent.
now we can just do this, right, and replicate this. We've already got the logic set up, right? And all we're just going to do is go into each, and we're just going to copy this one wee line. Simple as this, right? Because again the logic is getting the location from each attribute from each button, right? And we've set the data location, right? We can just literally LoJack and drop this in here, right? And in here, and again in Stockholm, in Reykjavik, in Vienna, in Munich, in Prague, Bratislava, Riga, Vilnius, and now that is every single one of these buttons has got a click handler to it. So let's go to Vienna. Nothing. Like you're saying, no birds, right? Let's go to Prague. We've got 4 birds. Let's go to Prince Edward Island,
Yep.
right? We get 14. Toronto, 528. Venus, 11. Riga, nothing. Bratislava, oh, caught out there, 112. So the fetch request works. We've got
Nice.
data.
Oh,
We've
look
got
how simple that
birds.
is.
And not only that, it's like just how fast it is. You know, it's all it is just leveraging basic JavaScript under the hood. So there's nothing else that is needing it to infer the data, execute, do anything over the top, anything other overly complicated than what it's currently doing.